What if love gave you everything the world dreams of, beauty, fame, passion, and yet quietly asked for everything in return, even your forever? There are love stories that feel like they were written in the stars, and then there are those that shine so brightly, they almost burn too fast. The story of John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy was one of those rare flames, beautiful, intense, and unforgettable. He was American royalty without a crown. The son of a legend, carrying the weight of a name that history would never forget. And she was elegance wrapped in mystery. A woman who didn't chase the spotlight, yet somehow made it follow her wherever she went. Their worlds were different, almost opposite. He belonged to a legacy carved into the heart of a nation, while she came from the quiet rhythm of the fashion world, working behind the scenes. But sometimes, love doesn't ask for permission, it simply happens. When they met, something shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic at first. It was subtle, like a quiet understanding between two souls who recognized something rare in each other. He found in her a sense of calm away from the chaos of public life. And she found in him not just a famous name, but a man searching for something real. Their love grew in whispers, in stolen moments away from cameras, in conversations that only they could understand. But the world was watching. Always watching. Every glance, every step, every smile, they were never truly alone. The media followed them like a shadow, turning their private love into public fascination. And while their relationship looked like a fairy tale from the outside, inside, it carried the weight of expectation. They married in secret, a quiet ceremony that felt like a rebellion against the noise of the world. For a moment, it seemed like they had found their escape. Just two people, in love, choosing each other despite everything. But love under pressure is never simple. The same spotlight that made them iconic also made their lives heavier. The whispers grew louder, the expectations stronger. And behind their composed appearances, there were struggles, moments where love had to fight to breathe under the weight of constant attention. Yet, even in those struggles, there was something undeniably real about them. They didn't walk away. They stayed. They tried. Because sometimes love isn't about perfection, it's about holding on, even when it's hard. And then, one night, everything changed. A flight. A quiet journey that was never meant to become a final chapter. The world stopped when the news broke. John F. Kennedy Jr. plane crash 1999. In a single moment, a love story that had captured hearts everywhere was gone. But some love stories don't end, they transform. What they shared didn't disappear that night. It became something timeless. A memory frozen in moments of laughter, in photographs, in the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. Their story reminds us that love isn't measured by how long it lasts, but by how deeply it's felt. That even under the brightest lights and the heaviest pressures, two people can still find something genuine. And maybe that's what makes their story so unforgettable. Not the fame, not the tragedy, but the simple, powerful truth, that for a moment in time, they chose each other. From the very beginning, the love between John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy was surrounded by a world that never looked away. It was not the kind of love that could quietly bloom in hidden corners. Instead, it unfolded under flashing cameras, whispered headlines, and constant curiosity. Every step they took together seemed to echo far beyond their own lives, as if their relationship belonged not just to them, but to everyone watching. For John, attention was nothing new. He had lived his entire life in the glow of public fascination, a symbol of legacy and expectation. But Carolyn was different. She came from a world where beauty was appreciated in silence, where elegance didn't demand attention, it simply existed. She valued simplicity, privacy, and a sense of control over her own identity. And yet, the moment she stepped into John's world, that quiet life began to dissolve. Their relationship became a paradox. They were deeply drawn to each other, yet constantly pulled apart by the noise around them. What they wanted was simple, moments of normalcy, shared laughter without an audience, a love that could exist without explanation. But what they had was something entirely different. A life where even the smallest gestures became public spectacle. There is something profoundly intimate about wanting to protect love from the outside world. For them, privacy wasn't just a preference, it was a necessity. It was the space where their relationship could breathe, where they could be just two people instead of symbols or stories. They sought it in quiet dinners, in walks through the city where they tried to blend into the crowd, in brief escapes from the relentless gaze that followed them. But the spotlight has a way of finding what it wants. The more they tried to hold on to their private world, the more the outside world leaned in. Cameras captured stolen moments, headlines tried to define what they felt, and public perception began to shape a narrative that was never fully theirs. And still, within all of this, there was something beautifully human about their struggle. It was the desire to love freely in a world that refused to look away. It was the quiet resistance of choosing each other, even when every part of their environment made that choice more complicated. The connection between John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy was not just a meeting of two people, it was the collision of two entirely different worlds, drawn together by something neither of them could fully explain. There was a quiet magnetism in their differences, a tension that didn't divide them but instead pulled them closer with an almost unspoken force. John carried with him a legacy that was impossible to ignore. Every room he entered already knew his name, his history, the expectations attached to him. His life had always been lived outwardly, shaped by public image, responsibility, and a sense of duty that extended beyond himself. He was warmth, charisma, and familiarity, a presence people felt they understood, even when they didn't truly know him. Carolyn, on the other hand, moved through life with a kind of quiet control. Her world in fashion, particularly her work with Calvin Klein, was built on subtlety, detail, and refinement. She wasn't drawn to attention, she shaped it from behind the scenes. Her strength was in her restraint, her ability to remain composed and distant in a world that often demanded exposure. Where John was open and expressive, Carolyn was guarded and introspective. And yet, it was exactly these contrasts that created the spark between them. He was drawn to her mystery, to the parts of her that remained untouched by the noise of his own life. She represented something rare to him, a space that felt untouched by expectation, a person who didn't see him as just a name, but as someone real beneath it all. In her presence, there was a sense of escape. For Carolyn, John's world was both captivating and overwhelming. There was something undeniably powerful about being close to a legacy so deeply woven into history. But it also came with a weight she had never sought. His openness, his ease with attention, stood in contrast to her need for distance, creating a delicate balance between admiration and unease. Their love lived in this in-between space. It was neither entirely comfortable nor entirely conflicted. It was a constant movement toward each other, shaped by curiosity, fascination, and the desire to understand what made the other so different. Love, when it is real, carries its own intensity. But for John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy, that intensity was amplified by something far greater than emotion. It was magnified by the constant, unrelenting presence of the public eye. Their passion did not exist in isolation. It lived in a world that watched, judged, and interpreted every detail of their connection. There is a certain kind of pressure that comes from being seen all the time. It changes the way moments are experienced. A simple walk becomes a performance. A quiet conversation becomes a story waiting to be told by someone else. For them, love was never just between two people, it was something observed, dissected, and often misunderstood by millions. In the beginning, their chemistry was undeniable. There was an energy between them that people could feel even from a distance. The way they moved together, the subtle glances, the unspoken language of closeness, it created an image of a couple deeply connected, almost inseparable. But passion, when placed under constant observation, begins to shift. It becomes heavier, more fragile, as if it has to withstand not only the emotions within it but also the expectations surrounding it. The media did not just follow them, it shaped how their relationship was perceived. Headlines turned moments into narratives, often simplifying something complex into something easily consumed. A single photograph could suggest distance. A brief expression could be interpreted as tension. Over time, this external storytelling began to press against the reality of what they were living. For Carolyn, this pressure felt especially invasive. Her nature was to remain private, to protect her emotions from unnecessary exposure. But the world demanded access to her thoughts, her reactions, her role in this highly visible relationship. That demand created a quiet strain, a feeling of being constantly watched without ever being fully understood. John, though more accustomed to public life, was not immune to this weight. There is a difference between growing up in the spotlight and choosing to build a deeply personal relationship within it. The expectations placed on him extended into his love life, turning his relationship into something symbolic, something larger than just two individuals trying to make it work. And within all this, their passion had to survive. It had to find space in between camera flashes, in between speculation, in between the noise that never seemed to fade. It was a love that burned brightly, but also one that had to endure the quiet exhaustion of always being seen. From the outside, the relationship between John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy seemed almost untouchable in its beauty. They looked like a perfect frame captured in time, effortless style, quiet elegance, and a connection that appeared unshakable. But love, no matter how beautiful it looks from a distance, always carries layers that the world cannot see. Behind the polished images and public fascination, there were moments that belonged only to them. Moments that didn't make headlines. Moments where the weight of everything around them settled into something more personal, more complicated. Love, in its truest form, is not just made of shared smiles and gentle glances, it is also shaped by misunderstandings, by silence, by the effort it takes to truly understand another person. Their differences, once magnetic, began to reveal a quieter tension. John's world was expansive, outward, filled with people and expectations that constantly pulled at his attention. Carolyn's world, by contrast, was more contained, more inward, rooted in a desire for control and privacy. These differences did not disappear with time, they deepened, creating moments where connection required more effort than it once did. There is something delicate about loving someone who lives life differently than you do. It asks for patience, for compromise, for the willingness to meet in the middle even when that space feels unfamiliar. For Carolyn, the constant exposure began to feel like an intrusion not just into her life, but into her sense of self. The world didn't just see her, it tried to define her, to shape her into something that fit the narrative surrounding them. And in those quiet moments, away from cameras but not entirely free from their influence, the pressure lingered. It showed itself in small ways, in the need for space, in the difficulty of maintaining balance, in the unspoken question of whether love alone could carry the weight they were living under. John, too, found himself navigating a space where love required more than just feeling. It required understanding a partner who experienced his world in a fundamentally different way. It required recognizing that what came naturally to him, the openness, the familiarity with attention, was something that demanded emotional strength from her every single day. Their struggles were not loud. They didn't unfold dramatically for the world to clearly see. Instead, they existed in subtle shifts, in expressions, in distance, in the quiet effort of trying to hold on to something meaningful while everything around them made that effort more complex. Some love stories are remembered for how they begin, others for how they unfold, but the story of John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy became eternal because of how suddenly it was taken away. There is something haunting about a love that doesn't slowly fade, but instead is frozen in time, held forever in its unfinished form. On the surface, it was just a journey. A quiet flight on a summer evening, something simple, something ordinary. There was no sign that this moment would become the final chapter of a story that had captured so many hearts. But life has a way of changing everything in a single instant, turning the ordinary into something irreversible. When news broke of the John F. Kennedy Jr. plane crash 1999, the world reacted not just with shock, but with a deep sense of loss that felt strangely personal. It was as if people weren't just mourning public figures, they were mourning a love they had watched, followed, and quietly believed in. Tragedy has a way of reshaping memory. It removes the noise, the speculation, the pressure that once surrounded a relationship, and leaves behind only what truly mattered. In that moment, all the complexities of their life together seemed to fade, replaced by a simpler truth, that they had loved each other in a world that rarely made that easy. Their story, once filled with motion and change, suddenly became still. Photographs turned into memories rather than moments. Glances, once fleeting, became permanent. Everything they had been, every smile, every struggle, every attempt to hold on to something real, was now preserved in a way that time could no longer alter. There is a certain kind of eternity that only tragedy can create. It does not extend life, but it deepens meaning. It transforms a relationship into something almost symbolic, something that lives not just in history, but in emotion. Their love became a reminder of how fragile connection can be, how quickly everything can shift, how even the most visible lives are still bound by the unpredictability of fate. And in that stillness, their story remains, untouched by what could have been, defined only by what was felt, and remembered in a way that never allows it to truly fade.